Hi, and welcome to day 5 of your Loving Your Authentic Self Challenge. My name is Carrie Suminia. I am a love and dating expert and an energy worker, and I am so thrilled that you have joined me today. This topic that I'm going to chat with you about in regard to self-love is something that's really important to me. It's a perspective shift and an understanding that I think is deeply important to our self-love journeys, as well as our experiences with love with other people in our lives as well. And that is this: love is not an emotion. While we can experience love in terms of feelings at different points throughout our lives, and you may be able to think of many examples in which you have felt love or felt loved or even felt loving, that is just one tiny facet of what love is. And the reason that I think it's so deeply important that we understand that love is not an emotion is that emotions are temporary indicators, like mile markers along a highway. They are states within ourselves that are not meant to last. We're not meant to live in any particular emotion at any particular time. We're meant to use our emotions as passing information. They help us move through the world. They help us understand how we're feeling, how we're responding to our environment, how we're responding to another person, or what's being shown to us or taught to us based on what we're experiencing in the moment. The important thing about emotions is that we understand that they are happening in the moment. And they give us a limited amount of information that we are intended to respond to in that moment. Love, on the other hand, is not an emotion, and it's a confusion that many people make. It's something that people are not generally clear on. And when we equate love with being an emotion, we limit our experience of something that is so big and so expansive and so gorgeous that it's just a shame. It is literally so limiting to think of love as an emotion because, remember, a passing state meant to give us limited information about how we're responding to our environment. Love, in its truest sense, is not a limited passing state. It's not something that comes and goes. It's not something that changes. It's not something that shifts depending on our environment or who we're with or where we are. Love is a state of being. And when we experience or we think of love in that limited definition of being an emotion or a feeling, the problem is that we expect to feel loved or loving or love in order to be in the state of love. And the truth is that love is a state of being. It is something that we choose. It is something that we can tune into. It is something that is expansive and exists within us and outside of us. It is not dependent on your emotions. It's not actually dependent on how you feel. And so many people who struggle with self-love, many people who struggle to really wake up and understand how to tangibly love themselves and enact love in their self-regard, do so because they don't always feel good about themselves. They don't always have the experience of good feeling emotions when it comes to their lives or themselves or their bodies or whatever other piece of yourself that you're struggling to love. And the truth is that we're human beings. Our emotions are going to fluctuate and shift and change all the time, many times a day even. And so if we are waiting to feel good, if we're waiting to have the appropriate emotions for an appropriate amount of time in order to experience love, we are doing ourselves a massive, massive disservice. And so today I want to free you from the misconception that love is an emotion. I want to free you from the misconception that you have to feel a certain way in order to love yourself, in order to be practicing self-love. Because the truth is that you can practice self-love even if you don't feel good. You can practice self-love even if you don't have the experience of temporary emotions that are comfortable in this moment. And sometimes our practice of self-love is actually something that's very uncomfortable. Sometimes the most loving thing that we can do for ourselves is something that is deeply uncomfortable, something that triggers our growth or our evolution or change. And as human beings, those things are not always the best feeling things. But when we divorce our definition of love from being a temporary emotion, we free ourselves to experience self-love in a realm that doesn't have to be limited by a positive feeling. And so we can see love in the things that we do for ourselves that may not feel good in the moment, but we know are loving. And listen, that also frees you from having to feel good to be in a state of love. And so those days that you wake up and you just are not feeling it, you're okay. Those days that you wake up and you're not really in love with your body, and you can find all the flaws in the mirror and your jeans just won't fit and you're frustrated, or the days that you feel sad, or if you struggle with depression or you struggle with anxiety and you have these emotional states that are not feeling loving, you are free from having to change those first. You're free from having to figure out your emotions in order to love yourself. Because there is nothing more expansive than understanding that love exists as a state outside of your temporary emotions. And that if you don't feel good, or you don't feel a happy emotion in this moment, you're absolutely okay. And it doesn't mean that your self-love is derailed. And it doesn't mean you're bad at loving yourself. It just means that you're human and you're experiencing an emotion. And so let's begin to separate our understanding of temporary emotions from our definition of self-love. And know that you can you can tune into the state of love because it's a part of who you are and where you came from, no matter what temporary emotion you're feeling right now at all. You can be in any emotional state. You can be sad, you can be anxious, you could be grieving. And you can still tangibly enact love toward yourself. You can still tangibly choose to regard yourself in a certain way. And so maybe you feel sad, but you're going to keep that boundary you set. Maybe you're grieving a relationship, but you're not going to text that boy when you're feeling lonely. Do you see the difference? Do you understand the difference between an emotional feeling that is meant to be temporary, that is meant to give you information for you to respond to in that moment, and believing and choosing in a bigger state for yourself and for your self-regard? And I want you to feel in this moment the freedom that comes with that understanding of self-love. Because so many of us are running around trying to manage our emotions to be loving and be positive and always feel good. And honestly, that is such a toxic way to approach love, because love doesn't always feel good. Doing loving things for ourselves isn't always comfortable, doesn't always make us feel happy in the moment. And even if we take that definition and that understanding of self-love and we expand it to the concept of love, your relationships aren't always going to feel good. Your relationships now or in the future aren't always going to trigger positive feeling emotions. You're going to have conflict. You're going to have difficulties. You're going to have to make hard decisions. You're going to have to be quarantined in a global pandemic as we are experiencing right now. And that doesn't mean you don't love each other, because love is a state. Love is a choice. It's something you choose to tap into. It's something you use as a baseline for all of your interactions, but your emotions may not line up with loving, and that is okay. They're not always meant to line up with loving, and you're free from that expectation. As of this moment, as of watching this video, you are free from that expectation. And it is such a beautiful place to be. A beautiful place to be. So as we shift our perspective around self-love, and we understand that it's not an emotion, and your emotions aren't always going to line up with that, and that's normal and okay and acceptable and human, and part of your experience here, and that love is a state and something you choose for yourself, whether it feels comfortable or not. Now you can wake up every morning and understand that love exists for you, that it is a state that you can tap into and something you can choose for yourself regardless of how you emotionally feel. From this point forward, make that commitment for yourself. Make the commitment to choose to love yourself in whatever means necessary, whether it feels good or not, and whether you feel good or not. And that love can look a whole lot of different ways. And sometimes love is just acknowledging your emotions. Sometimes love is acknowledging your needs in light of your emotional state. Sometimes love is as simple as believing that you are worthy of being acknowledged for however you feel, that you are worthy of being heard in the middle of your emotional state that might not feel so great. I want to end this self-love challenge not only with this really massive perspective shift about what love is for some of us, but with doing a really short, really brief, but powerful EFT tapping sequence that I not only want you to do with me right here in this video right now, but I want you to remember it. I want you to come back to this. I want you to use this in your life when you're having those days where it's really difficult and you're not sure if you're, really in love with yourself. When you're not sure if you're being great at self-love and you don't feel great and your emotions might not be lining up with what feels loving or feels comfortable or feels good. I want this to be a resource for you to help you tap back into that state of love, that choice of love. So I'm going to keep it short and I'm going to keep it accessible because, again, I want you to use this again. So all you have to do if you're new to EFT tapping, if you're new to this video, is follow along with me. You're just going to do what I do and say what I say. It's very simple. And there's lots of information out there about EFT tapping, why it works. And I won't go into all that here, but that information is available. It's a very clinically proven technique. So again, we're going to start on the side of your hand, 2 or 3 fingers, just tapping lightly. And you're just going to, again, follow along with what I say, tapping the points comfortably that I tap. Even though I don't feel like I love myself. And sometimes I struggle to feel loving. Right here and right now, I am okay. And I choose to love all parts of me. Even though I don't always feel loving toward myself. And some days it feels downright impossible. Right here and right now, I'm okay. And I choose in this moment to love all of my emotions. Even though I've been holding myself to an impossible standard. Of having to feel loving all the time. Right here and right now, I'm okay. And I choose in this moment to love myself by dropping all of those impossible expectations. Okay, moving to your eyebrow point. I don't always feel loving. And I'm not supposed to. My love for myself is more than my emotions. And right now, I choose to free myself from the expectation that I have to feel good to love myself. I choose to love myself even when I feel bad. I choose to love myself even when I feel anxious or depressed. I choose to love myself even when I don't feel very loving. I choose to love myself regardless of my emotional state. I know this is possible because love, whether for myself or someone else, is a choice, not an emotion. And I can show myself love no matter how I feel. In fact, taking the time to acknowledge my emotions, even when they're hard or difficult or painful, is an act of self-love. I am entitled to my emotions. And my self-love is not dependent on them. I choose in this moment to love myself, even when it's uncomfortable. I choose in this moment to love myself, even when it feels like others don't. I choose to love myself when I'm single. I choose to love myself when I'm partnered. I choose to love myself when I feel good and when I don't. I choose to love myself through all of my experiences. I choose to love myself through all my ups and downs. I choose to love myself even when I don't feel like it. Love is my natural state. I am love. Love is my natural state. I choose to embody love. No matter what's happening around me no matter what's happening inside of me. I choose love. I choose love for myself. At all times. And I am free from the expectation that I have to be positive or feel good to love myself. I choose love. Okay, taking a deep breath in through your nose, sending the breath down into the belly and then releasing through your mouth. Taking one hand and placing it over your heart, and then using 2 fingers on the other hand to press right here between the knuckle of your pinky and the knuckle of your ring finger, really lightly. There's a little groove right there. And repeating after me, there are parts of me that have been healed by this. And there are parts of me that have not yet been healed. The parts of me that have not yet are willing to learn from the parts that have. My mind, body, spirit, and energy system are accepting that information now. New neural pathways. The information transfer is complete. I am grateful. Thank you. Together, divine. Thank you so much for joining me throughout this entire challenge. If you missed the first 4 days and you're just catching this video, you can find the entire playlist on my YouTube channel. I'll put the link in the description. If you are with me after 5 days of this self-love immersion, thank you so much. Thank you for trusting me with your journey. Thank you for joining me on these videos. And I hope that you have left these 5 days with a new perspective of self-love, with a little bit of a refresher, and perhaps a renewed sense of self-regard. It is so deeply important as we pursue relationships with other people, as we show up in our existing relationships, that we have and are maintaining our sense of self-regard and our sense of self-love. It changes everything. And I hope that this has benefited you in so many ways.